Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in the International Relations Council for the International Career Series on Journalism and Correspondence. The International Career Series is designed to help you explore different international career paths, whether you're graduating and entering the job market, looking for a change, just curious, or interested in some other for another reason. You'll soon hear from an individual who can share their work in an international field, offering insight into their own educational background, career path, and intricacies of their position, and recommendations for your own search. My name is Natalie Friend. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator Vista with the IRC. For those unfamiliar, the IRC is a nonpartisan, apolitical organization that provides a platform for greater understanding of international topics and how they intersect with the Kansas City community. We will be recording today's event and broadcasting it live on Facebook. So if you'd like to review this conversation at a later date or share it with someone who you think might enjoy it, feel free to visit our YouTube or Facebook page. This recording will join many others as a free resource for the people of Kansas City to use and revisit time and time again. Today, we are very pleased to be joined by Joyce Davis. Joyce Davis is the president of the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, an affiliate of the World Affairs Councils of America. She is also a media consultant. She was the senior manager of Radio Farda US International Broadcasting Service into Iran. She was also former deputy foreign editor for Knight Ridder newspapers. Prior to her work at Knight Ridder, Ms. Davis served as a foreign editor and director of news staffing at National Public Radio, as well as an on-air reporter doing special reports on the Middle East and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. In her more than 30 years of journalism, Ms. Davis has been a reporter, columnist, and editor in both broadcast and print. She began her journalism career at the New Orleans Times-Picayune. I might need correction on my pronunciation there, Joyce. In 1997, Ms. Davis wrote Between Jihad and Salaam, Profiles in Islam, a collection of profiles and interviews with Islamic leaders around the world, which was published in 1997. Her most recent book is Martyrs, Innocence, Vengeance, and Despair in the Middle East. Ms. Davis currently works in Prague as the Associate Director of Broadcasting for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. And Ms. Davis is a former Senior Fellow with the United States Institute of Peace, as well as a member of the Board of Advisors for Women in International Security and the Georgetown University Journal of International Affairs. It is so safe to say that Joyce has fully engaged in the international experience and in journalism, and we thank you so much for joining us and giving us some of your expertise and time today. For this event, please feel free to post your questions through the chat feature at the bottom of your screen throughout the program, and we will do our best to get as many of them as possible. Or if you're comfortable, unmute yourself, say hello, and ask Joyce personally. If you would like to connect with us at the IRC, please feel free to log on to our website, irckc.org, which will also be available in the chat box. We encourage you to check it out if you're interested in other programs just like this one. So with all that being said, I'd like to say hello to Joyce and ask if you have anything else to share with the audience before we get started.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you. That was great. The only thing I'll share is that the bio is a little outdated. I'm actually now in Harrisburg, working back in the United States from Prague, but I'm now working as the outreach and opinion editor, writing all the editorials and taking in all the letters to the editor and the op-eds for the leading news organization in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, that's Penn Live and the Patriot News. So I'm happy to talk about my career and all the ups and downs there are for a foreign correspondent and take questions. But no, I'm ready to go when you are.
Amazing. Well, I'll get us started with a couple questions, but again, like I said, I encourage our audience today to feel free to shoot any sort of question you have in the chat or ask, just raise your hand either on the screen or use the button at the bottom of your Zoom call, and I will call on you so you can ask Joyce personally. But for now, Joyce, could you tell us what drew you into the field of journalism in the first place, and what motivates you and keeps you passionate about your work?
That's a question people ask me, and the answer is just so like normal. My mother told me to do it. I mean, I was ready to go off to college and I didn't know what I would major in. So I turned to my mother and says, well, what do I major in? And she said, journalism. And normally that would be fine, except when I stepped into this career and went going to college, where I lived, New Orleans, and it was New Orleans Times-Picayune. New Orleans was a very segregated society, and there were no role models of African-American women as journalists. certainly not working as reporters and certainly not as foreign correspondents. So it was a big risk that I took. And I remember my mother saying, yes, but I want you to go ahead and major in journalism because that's really what you should be doing. But back it up by taking some education courses so that if it doesn't work out, you can at least be a teacher. And you know what I told her? No safety nets. It's going to be journalism or nothing. But I think she knew that I loved writing. I was curious about the world, and I was interested in people. I would talk to anybody. So those are all prerequisites for being a journalist.
Okay, that's a wonderful story. And obviously it worked out well for you. So I guess you didn't need the safety net.
I refused it. But you know, if I'd had that safety net, I mean, I can understand the mother wanting you to have, but if I'd had it, it might have been very easy for me to retreat to it and not to persevere through whatever the difficulties were in becoming a journalist. I actually started working as a reporter for the New Orleans Times-Picayune in my junior year of college. So I was 19 years old and I worked the night side shift from 3 to 11 and went to school, took classes in the morning. And so that was really the beginning of my career.
Yeah, wow. So I want to touch on, since we were just at the beginning, I want to touch on what makes, obviously you've had an international career and you've done journalism everywhere. But what is it that makes, for those who are, thinking about entering this field, what makes your work international, in general? Like, what international opportunities are there for journalists? Does every journalist travel like the way you did, or did you have to seek that out?
No, that's an excellent question. Journalism is such a varied and diverse field. You can be a gardening editor and only write about flowers and gardens, and you can be a book editor and only read books and write about them. You can be a sports writer, right, and go and cover games, and you can be an education writer and focus. So no, this is a field that honestly allows someone to explore their own interests, their own passions, which is why I love the field of journalism. I have worked starting out as a neighborhood editor and columnist, writing on my own neighborhood and talking to elected officials and on. Then you move up and you report on city government, and then you move up and you report on state government. So it's a varied field. I always had a passion for the world. I don't know why. I think it may have come from living in a city like New Orleans, which has such strong ties to France. I mean, most of the country is British, or in fact, where I am now in Harrisburg, it's much more of a connection to Germany and to perhaps the Central Europe. But in New Orleans, it was French, and I have a French family background. So I was always curious about traveling the world, what's going on in the world. And eventually it also led me, because of my religious connections, my father was a pastor, to explore the Middle East. I wanted to go to the Holy Land and see what's going on there. And that led me to learn that of all the issues that were basically enveloping that region, that became my specialty, the Middle East.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it is such, obviously, I mean, most fields I think are so varied, but I think when I think of journalism, maybe it's because I'm situated in the international space, I'm always like, oh, it's very international, but you're right, there are a lot of niches. So but thank you for sharing your particular corner of it.
And the truth is, by getting into the international, that's really an elite group, and not everybody can step into that. Because it really requires you to, first of all, know something about the world, to be comfortable hopping on a plane or getting in a car and being in a part of the world. And frankly, if you're going places, you're generally going places that are dangerous. You're generally going places where because why else would you go? You want to know what's going on there, right? That being said, I actually started out going on vacations. And when I would go on vacation, I would come back and write a travel story for our travel section about what it was like there. And eventually I saw, well, why don't I go and try to just maybe talk to the president of the country or something? And you'd be amazed how easily sometimes doors open, especially if you're an American journalist. So I really started by going off on vacations and coming back, and for my newspaper, writing about where I had been.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's interesting too, because, sometimes, our audience is not always American. And I think it's interesting to note the distinction between, coming at this career from the United States perspective, or someone based anywhere else in the world. You could still absolutely do this, but it does look different depending on where you are, right?
Well, right, and it depends upon how free your media is. Remember, I also worked for about 5 years. You mentioned that in Prague for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and its mission is to actually provide news and information to places in the world that we consider closed. For a while, my services, broadcast services, were in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the countries of Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. Those are places where free flow of information was in jeopardy. And so our job was to provide, and we hired people from those countries to report on what's going on in those countries, in those native languages. So again, if you have an international audience and young people thinking about wanting to become a reporter, you can certainly look to places like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Martyrs, Radio Free Asia. Voice of America is one. It reports to the foreign world about the United States, about our own culture in English generally. But there's a wide array of opportunities for people in other countries to step into journalism, including to step into U.S. international broadcasting.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to our first audience question, I do have one more question for you, Joyce. What would people be surprised to learn about your work? And what might people not understand when you're looking at journalism and the international space of journalism from face value?
Well, surprised, I would say, is you would be surprised how different your perspectives change by being an international journalist, by someone who goes in, rather than going in to tell people how it is, to ask people about their views, to listen, to not come in with the baggage of the Western perspective, but to really seek out other perspectives. It changes your view completely. And it sometimes can be hard coming back and talking to Americans who have a kind of narrow view sometimes. So the other thing, I guess, is that's, it's expensive. You really need to have an organization backing you. It can be very dangerous because, as I say, you're generally going places that have unrest or unsettled. That's where we want to report. And I focused and specialized. My second book really wanted to look at the issue of Islamic or at the issue of suicide bombers and terrorism and all of that. And I really wanted to find out just what Islam says about those issues. And so I stepped into talking to people from the most peace-loving people to the most militant, going inside refugee camps. In fact, talking to people who were supporting suicide bombers and being in that mix. So that's surprising. And it's surprising how you'll walk away with new understandings about what motivates people to do even bad things.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And obviously, the mission is to uncover the truth, right? Every truth. And it sounds like it's really tough work, but obviously it's very valuable.
Well, it's extraordinarily valuable, but it does take a special type of person to be able to do it. First of all, when I first went overseas, I simply said goodbye to my family and threw up everything and headed out, right? So to be able to make your way in a new place, to be able to accept that wherever I'm is not going to be like where I left. It's not home. It's something different. To be open in your mind as well as in your heart to what you're going to experience, and also to learn to be careful and to do your homework and know when you need to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. It does take that sort of street smarts, right?
World smarts.
Yeah. So our first question is from Bruno, which I will, Bruno, just switch up a little bit because I want to focus on Joyce's personal experience. I know she can't speak for all journalists, but so sometimes some people perceive that journalists in the news cover seems like it's always bad news, right?
Right.
What's your personal experience with that? And do you ever do you have a lot of say in how things are covered, or what we're covering? You focused, you said, a lot on terrorism and things like that. Was that your choice, or was that coming from the editor? What does that look like on the the individual journalist side?
No, to do this, the reporting I did on terrorism was my choice. I wanted to try to understand why would a young person blow himself up. And yes, that's pretty bad news. But let's think about it. Let's think about human nature. If I come to you and I said, "Oh, it's a pretty day," and let's talk about how pretty the grass is and how pretty the leaves are. But if I come to you and say, "Listen, there's a fire burning over there. You're listening more." So it's a kind of human nature. We're basically catering to what the public really wants to hear. Now, that's been very clear to many journalists that people also want some good news mixed in there. And it's especially true when we're covering minority communities in the United States. We tend to only report on crime, only the bad news. We need to understand that we also need to report on the good news things that are happening. So when I was in the Middle East, especially when I remember one of my most memorable trips was to go around the world and to do a report on the experiences of Muslim women. And as a Western woman, I thought I was going to go and uncover atrocities and report on how horrible these women have it in the world, and we need to stand up for them. And indeed, I came back with a completely different story, a story of the wisdom of many Muslim women, of the beauty of their lives, of their struggle that is similar to the struggle of women all over the world. So it was much less a bad news and much more a good news story because I was open to the truth.
Yeah, that's wonderfully put. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
We have a couple questions coming in, so thank you so much to our participants today for joining. And again, I encourage you to either type your questions and comments in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand, either visually or using the button below, and I will make sure to call on you. But Jordan wants to know, did you run into a lot of dangerous situations when you were doing international journalism? Talking earlier with your work in refugee camps and with individuals who are quite militant. But media, she says, seems to have a tendency to make international reporting and journalism seem very dangerous. Was that your experience?
Well, it can be dangerous because again, what I said is that generally if an editor comes and tells you head off to Jordan, it's because something's going on in Jordan that is important, that we need to know about in the United States, and people want to know about. So it can be very dangerous because many times journalists are reporting on war scenes. When I was reporting on the Israeli-Palestinian, I would go into the Palestinian areas, and sometimes I would be in the middle of some scuffles, or I remember one time there was a stun bomb. I never got to feel what a stun bomb feels like. You never want to know what a stun bomb feels like. But so it can be, but that's an aspect of the reporting, and you don't have to do that. There are some international journalists who only go and delve into, let's say, policy issues or foreign affairs issues and talk only to presidents. But you have to be prepared that when you're going into another country, you never know what you're stepping into, right? And so it could be. But it also can be very beautiful. There are some journalists who only report on cruises and travel and beautiful things. So just depends upon the kind of reporter, the kind of person you are, what are you open to, and what are you capable? Where are you being led? What kind of reporting?
Yeah. So I have a question, and this kind of hits on the kind of person you're talking about. And so I want to go back to some of your training and early in your career. Would you say that degrees or experiences with elite institutions and elite journalism schools are necessary to be successful in the foreign, and international journalism space? Or can you really sort of work your way up, and where do people, where do you recommend young people get that training, and how do you become that person who's ready for those situations?
Right, excellent question. And no, you don't need a Harvard degree or a master's or PhD to be a journalist or even to be an international correspondent. That being said, a quality education doesn't hurt anyone, but you can get a quality education in many, many different ways from great institutions. But I always tell people, I think my greatest education has come from travel, from doing the work that I actually have done. I remember being appalled when I first went into the Middle East and I sat to talk with Muslims about the underpinnings of the animosity with the Western world. And the first thing they talked to me about was the Crusades. And I said, the Crusades? Why are we talking about the Crusades? And they said, well, the Crusades are very much central to the issues that we are dealing with, how many hundreds of years later. So I had to go back and study really what happened with the Crusades. And I remember one book I read, The Crusades from Muslim Eyes, was really enlightening. But again, I had not really read any Eastern authors. I had not read, my education had been Western centric. I did not know about African authors. I did not know about African scientists. I did not know about the contributions of the Muslim world to algebra and to science. All of those things, Americans are frequently quite ignorant about the contributions of other cultures and other civilizations to world civilizations and to our own. So no, you don't need elite degrees, but you do need a certain character. First of all, you got to be confident. You got to trust yourself and trust your instincts. You've got to have a certain degree of self-confidence. And you have to be adventurous. You have to have an adventurous spirit. It doesn't mean you have to have the spirit of a conquering person going around, but a curiosity, a willing to step into difficult or different situations, a willingness to explore different cultures. I can tell you all the different kinds of foods I've eaten, and I've only rejected, I think, 2. One was when I was offered on Christmas Day the prize meal of the eyeballs of the goat in Greece, and I could not do that. And I think another time when I was in China, when there was a full course meal of duck that included drinking, I think, some liqueur that included the blood, I could not do that. So you have to be open.
Yeah, it's definitely open-minded. So what else, and this touches on a question from Chrissy. She asks, reaching out and networking seems very important in your role. So, talking about mentor relationships, and that hits on a question I had, what else mentors, networks have helped you find and grow in your work?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Being open and reaching out to people in your community. And I will tell you, one of the coups of my career that really catapulted me and even got NPR to offer me the position of Middle East editor was when I went on a 2-week vacation to Tunisia. And I ended up interviewing a man called Yasser Arafat in the compound of the PLO there. And how would you think I would know how to reach out and find out who that is or make those contacts? It came from my being open in my relationship with, at that time, the Consul General of France in New Orleans. And I simply would go to events. I ended up having a lunch with him. I ended up, maybe having a dinner and telling him I was headed to Tunisia. And boy, and he says, why won't you interview Arafat? And I said, could I? Do you think? So again, mentoring, but it's not just mentoring in your profession. It's mentoring in your community, the outreach you have to diverse peoples. You never know where that will lead, but making those contacts is extraordinarily important.
I think that, well, first off, that's incredible. But I think that's wonderful what you said about mentoring, not just within your workspace and, directly in your field, but with other people, right? Because you never know where those connections will come from. That's wonderful advice. It looks like Ali has his hand raised. Ali, you're welcome to unmute yourself. I just ask that you try and keep your questions succinct so that way we can hear more from Joyce and the other, get more questions in as well. So do you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Ali Abdullah. I'm a Somali refugee family man, as I mentioned in the list. And I think that I'm a journalist by talent. I didn't study. And why I say I think that I'm talented, because I wrote something as perspective and it happened exactly 100%. So I would like one of you, both of you, Miss Joyce and our IRC staff, I don't know her name, to hold my hand and give me some way to get trained and to improve my journalism journey as free of charge, because I'm refugee, I can't pay any fees.
Yes.
And is it a journalism divided into 2, academic and talented or not? How to know the academic journalist and how to know the talented journalist? That was my question. And I appreciate you for your valuable time.
Ali, that's a very good question. And here's what I would suggest to you. Yes, there's talent. That's what I'm saying. The most important thing is the person who has the drive, the talent to want to be able to basically report and tell people what's going on in the world around them. But that, again, sometimes people think of journalists as people who sit down and express their own opinions about things. That is one aspect of journalism, and it's the kind that I'm actually doing right now, but it comes after 30 to 40 years of basically another kind of journalism, and that is reporting and reflecting things going on in our own communities in the world, talking to different people and telling the world what they say, not what I say. But if I'm going to report on, let's say, the status of Somali refugees in Kansas City, I would go and talk to you. I'd go and talk to a woman. I'd go and talk to someone. And I would say, here's what they say is their experience. Here's what they say, not what I said. Okay. So if you're able to do that kind of reporting, meaning talking to other people and accurately reflecting what they say, and also being open to differing opinion. If someone says, I think it's absolutely great here, I'm having a great time, is there somebody who has the opposite point of view? This is the worst place I ever lived in my life. And you need to reflect both of those points of view in your story. And you need to try to determine the balance they should have. If 10 people say it's a great place and one says it isn't, you need to let your audience, the people, know this is a minority, but one person, but 10 said this. Okay, so that's the reporting. But right now, here's what you can do. You have to also know something about the art. So you have to know English grammar. You have to know style. What is the style that they write? AP style. So look up what AP style is, because that's what most newspapers will want. If you broadcast or radio, that's completely different. That's another form of journalism. I've been in radio, I've been in television, I've been in print, and now online. So all of those are different ways. But here's what I would suggest you do right now, Ali. Think of writing a letter to the editor about a topic, or think of writing an op-ed. Get someone to look over it and be open to critical editing, meaning let someone read it and they say, this doesn't make any sense, Ali. You have to accept. It doesn't make sense. That's a reader. If they say it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. I have to go back and change it. So I would say start there. Is there anything you care about that you would like to make a statement on? Make that statement. A letter to the editor is generally under about 250 words, so not much. An op-ed is a longer opinion piece that you have to develop an idea. But start with that. Let someone read it. Let someone critique it. Then submit it to the newspaper.
I see. I'm
sorry, Ali, I was going to ask just a follow-up question for Joyce, because normally I save this question for a bit later in the discussion. But Joyce, what resources or places online would you recommend Ali or any of our other audience members check out to be a better writer, to get a better sense of the field? Do you have particular newspapers or broadcast services that you're like, this is the tops, or these are what I would recommend reading up on? Do you have any resources like that in particular that you would point someone to?
I would go to penlive.com, which is our newspaper, penlive.com, and look at and go to the opinion section. Click, you'll be some tabs there and there'll be click opinion. You'll be able to get a sense of what people are writing about, at least in Pennsylvania, right? You can also certainly go and look at USA Today, look up at, because that'll be a simpler and a reflection of what's going on around the country. But look at the opinion section, because what you're talking about is writing your own views on something. And that will help you. 3 things. Keep it simple. Remember that when you're writing for a wide variety of people, some of whom may not have even a high school education, and some of whom may have PhDs and beyond. You have to be able to reach the lowest of those to communicate with those who are least educated. So we often are told, write at a 6th grade level so that it's clear, it's concise. There aren't long sentences that are running on together. One sentence, and generally in a longer article, you can't develop more than 3 points. for people to be able to follow you. That's for writing. Now, if you want to do a blog or a podcast or something like that, that's a completely different genre, but that's journalism too. And that's another way that you can do your own podcast and put it out.
Thank you, Joyce, so much. That seems really great advice. So I do have another question in the chat from Chrissy, and she's wondering if you could speak on how to have meaningful, diverse conversations in a virtual world, you know? So obviously I bet journalism has probably looked a little different in the last year or two. And I think maybe moving forward, you know, we're looking at a hybrid life, right? So what advice might you have for young journalists or people who are looking to get into the journalist field in international correspondence specifically, in connecting with sources and with people for stories?
Well, if you go to the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg's Facebook page, you will see that I have engaged in conversations, these diverse conversations throughout this pandemic. It was all we had left. So we've had, for example, several conversations about COVID-19 and its impact. We did one on the impact on K through 12. We did one on the impact on college campuses, you know, COVID on campus. We've done just any, and of course, when all the protests were going on, we brought in Black Lives Matters people to talk. And we talked about, why are there Black Lives Matter protesters in Paris? And then, I mean, what's the overseas connection? So you go to that and you'll be able to see, but basically you just get a few people together who have something to say and talk. Make sure you have a theme that you want to talk around, but allow people to talk and make sure that they, as Natalie was suggesting, they're able to be concise and not just carry on and on and on and not let anybody else have a chance.
I think that's great advice. And I think, you know, I think all of what Joyce has said, it would be what probably other journalists would echo too. So if you have journalists in your own communities, you know, if you're not located in Kansas City, or if you are located in Kansas City, I know we have some wonderful journalist outlets, you know, with the Star and with a number of KCUR. And so if you're looking as for specific advice, I'm sure we would be happy to assist as well. And we've been having some great conversations as well with the IRC. So we can still have these international and conversations. They just look a little different, I think.
But this is a great thing that you're doing, to be able to explore different professions, international professions, in a kind of intimate way that people can really reach out and ask questions. And of course, I do say that if you have, you can provide my email, and if there's any help I can be privately, I'd be happy to send information.
Awesome. Thank you, Joyce.
Yep.
All right, so my next question is, let me see if I can get back to it. Oh yes, so you mentioned, obviously you talked about the different types of journalism you've done, just you, between broadcast and print and radio, and so my question is, you know, what does the job look like in the day-to-day, right? So, you know, if you're an international correspondent doing research on a story, are you on foot in a refugee camp, or, you know, do you spend a lot of time? So do you spend a lot of, I guess my question is, do you spend a lot of time in the field, or do you spend a lot of time at a desk? You know, what does the job look like from 9 to 5, or is it a 9 to 5?
Well, no, it isn't a 9 to 5. That's the first thing. But let's say I have been a foreign correspondent in the field. So you're out there in the field, and you're right. And it depends upon, are you out there in the field as a daily correspondent, meaning you have to file a story every day? Or are you out there in the field gathering, reporting, and gathering information for a longer ranged piece? So let's just take, if you're working for NPR and you have to file a story every day, by the end of the day, you have to have something to say to NPR. So you wake up and you probably are sending a message to your editor, basically telling your editor, today, I'm going to go out and do a story on the schoolgirls who were abducted from the refugee camp. And I'm going to talk to this person, and this person. I hope they'll talk to me, but I hope to have the story back ready for you by 2 o'clock your time, which will be 10 o'clock my time. So you're communicating with the home office to let them know what you're doing. You're going to be available to them. Now you have cell phones, so it's much easier. When I was reporting, there were no cell phones. You just hope you could get to a telephone at the hotel or at the post office. But now you can communicate or text via almost immediately. But keep in mind, there's a time difference. You may be 8 hours ahead or 10 hours ahead. You don't know then your people at home. So then you head out. You hopefully are able to make sure and to make appointments so that where you're going, people are there. But I have found that not everybody has the same sense of timeliness and being punctual. So I have gone places and the appointment was for 10 a.m. and they come at 11 a.m. or, you know, so, but you then go out and try to do your interviews and your reports. After you think you have enough, you head back to your hotel, or if you're really close and you have it on deadline, you got to sit in your car or find it and type out what you have to do and get it to them. And then you have to wait for the editor to get back to you and says, got a question on this. Did you fact check this? Let me know, we have to change this. And then you got to go back and do the changes. That's how it kind of worked with NPR when it was a radio. And then you have to read it find a quiet place that you're going to read it, right, into the microphone. If you're writing, it's a little bit easier because you're just writing and they'll post it on the website. But if you're more leisurely and you're going and you're doing research for something you'll do later, then you simply plan your day for what you want to do that day. And you don't have to worry about those deadlines. But frequently you do have to worry about communicating with the home office and being open to changes or things that they may want you to do that you weren't prepared to do. Before I would go into the field, I would always make sure I had people on the ground who were ready to help me, people who would be what we call our fixers, people who know that area, can make sure I know where I'm going, can warn me of any problems. So someone on the ground who's going to basically be my assistant and help make appointments for me.
Yeah. That's super, super interesting. And it's wonderful, I think, to get an inside look on what the day looks like, because, you know, on the reader side of things, you know, it just appears in front of you every morning. You get the notification about the news or you're listening on your way into work, but there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Oh yes, it can be stressful because again, it's deadline work many times. You know, I told them at 2 o'clock, I've got to have it ready because they're going on air at 2 o'clock. So, and then sometimes I don't have it ready, so I just have to go live. Talk to me about it. Okay, here I am, Joyce Davis in Khartoum. And you have to be ready to move, and it can be stressful. Yeah, and thinking on your feet.
Would you say that to some extent it requires sort of an interest in, you know, adrenaline, you know, adrenaline junkie, so to speak? You know, would you say that comes with the job?
Yes, you have to like adrenaline, and many of these reporters, especially foreign correspondents, feed on that. They like excitement. They don't like things to be the same, right? That definitely is true. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so Jordan has a question. Do you find one type of journalism to be more effective or more readily received by people than others? So I'm assuming she means either, you know, radio or print with this question, or video with this question.
You know, that is an interesting question. Everybody has their preferences of where. Now, right now, I would ask you, where do you get your news? There's a concern that younger people are not getting as much in-depth information as the older people or other people once were getting, right? So right now, we're told that younger people are getting quick blurbs on their phones, and they just quick news alerts, et cetera. And they may go in and watch a video if they want more of it. So I think journalism and how we communicate with the world is changing. And you have to respect, you can't just say, well, you have to do it this way. Look how many newspapers are now going out of business. So at one point, I would have told you, the newspaper is the anchor. That's where you can trust. They have time to report. They're going to give you more in-depth, accurate reporting. But people started turning away. They didn't have time to sit down in the morning with the newspaper and read all that stuff. Stories are much shorter now. Reporters used to be edited heavily. So I'll give you this example. I would go in and I'd give a story to my newspaper editor. The newspaper editor would look at it, make the changes. I have to go back and make those changes. That then goes to something called the copy desk. The copy desk would look over it for grammar errors or style errors. I told Ali about the AP style that we have to, basically that just means, do I spell out the letters, the 6, or do I write the numeral 6? There's a style for what we do. Do I put a period behind PM, or do I just do PM, right? That's a style we do. So basically journalism has changed. Many more people now are getting stuff online. We have to accept that. Many young people want it quicker, more concise, and when they have time, they delve in deeper. So I love radio. I think radio is one great way, but now I just think online and the podcast and all that are coming as emerging as the primary way younger people are getting news. And that means the next generation is going to determine what journalism looks like.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely astute. You know, and it's funny because I remember when I was growing up, you know, sitting at the Sunday table, you know, with my grandfather and his coffee, and we would both read the paper. He would read the paper and I would look at the cartoons, right? But
Right.
now, you know, I don't have a print newspaper. You know, I have a few subscriptions to digital versions, but really what I do is, like you said, is podcasts, for example, you
Yep.
know, while I'm on my way to work and stuff. So it definitely is changing. And I think
And
yeah, go
if
ahead.
you can consider how many magazines have gone out, I mean, people aren't really reading the news magazines like Time and Newsweek and all that. That used to be a way really informed people had time. Newsweek, I was reading 4 or 5 papers a day, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, right? To keep informed of things. Now I don't really do that. I do still get the Wall Street Journal and I get the New York Times and I get my local paper. But the truth is, much of what I'm being informed about is online. I'm reading stories as they come, you know, as they flash before me.
Yeah. Would you say, so this is a question, you know, obviously you talk about being online and, you know, social media is a huge part of it. And I know Twitter, you know, Twitter news, right? Getting your news through Twitter. Would you say that it takes, would you say, I guess, journalists nowadays, there's sort of a requirement for a public persona, you know, you need to have an active Twitter feed, you need to, you know, engage your readers, you know, do journalism even there on social media, which has traditionally been a personal space?
Yeah, and that's what's so tough for me because I as the opinion writer and the person who writes the editorials for the paper, people are always looking at what I tweet about and all this. But I'm also, frankly, a personal. I have a family, right? So I sometimes just tweet out a picture of my son. You know, I like my son, or also I'm also a very religious person. I faith, and so I will sometimes tweet my husband's sermons. He's a pastor, so you're getting a much more than just the side of me that's the journalist but my whole picture. But how do you keep all that stuff separate? You can't anymore. You can't. And you do need a public persona. People want to know what you're about and they will seek it out.
So that's, I guess, advice to all of you to make sure that your Twitter feeds and your Facebook feeds are appropriate for your line of work. So we are coming up on our time and it's been such a joy. So I encourage any of our audience members, if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But Joyce, I guess I have a few last questions for you. So
it's great talking to you, Natalie. You could be a journalist.
Thank you. So do you have any anecdotes or, you know, of an exciting or inspiring moment, you know, in your international correspondence career that you would like to share that might inspire our audience here today who are either with us live or will be watching this afterwards, that you'd be willing to share with us?
Well, I think, you know, one of my most, I think, memorable and important times was when I was working, frankly, with people from all over the world with Radio Free Europe. We were there, all expats based in Prague. And I was working with people, you know, journalists from Iran, from Iraq, all these different countries. And this journalism to them was more than just a job. For them, they were bringing freedom, democracy to their countries through their work. They were exposing themselves to persecution by their countries. And to be around journalists like that, who really were giving it all, only to share the truth, only to make sure that the people in their countries had accurate information. That to me was inspiring. And I can tell you that many of them did suffer, but they suffered because they knew there was a mission in it for them. So, you know, that is what has kept me inspired. And even now, you know, back in the United States, you know, we have a very great responsibility to try to restore trust in journalism and in journalists. We see that for political reasons, journalists are being attacked, but most of the people that I work with are decent, honest, hardworking people who have that same sense of mission in our country. Let's make sure Americans know the truth. Let's make sure that, because you can't have a democracy without an informed citizenry. Mm-hmm. And if the citizenry is misinformed, you have misgovernment. You have a messed up society.
Yeah.
So that inspires me that I have to keep pushing. We have to make sure that we restore trust in honest journalism.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much to you and your colleagues for continuing to push, because I know I appreciate it. And the work you do as well with the World Affairs Council obviously is a part of that, I think, for sure.
Yes.
My final question is, what final advice do you have for a young aspiring journalist or someone who's looking to enter the journalism field? You know, what piece of wisdom would you share with them in terms of how to make it?
Well, journalism and what we've been talking about here is really a question of doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I say that? Look at all of the media that you have available to you at the drop of a hat. There's a young woman who's a refugee from Sudan in our region, and she started her own show called the Hager al-Sheikh Show on Facebook. She had me come on, and that's a community show where people are turning in. Nobody told her how to do it. She just did it. And she's galvanizing people around her. She is, in her own way, a journalist. And there's nothing to stop you, Ali, right now from getting a Facebook page, starting your own show, talking to people, bringing people in to talk, and being a platform where people can engage. So what I would tell you is there are so many opportunities now for you to write. If you're a writer, have your own blog, write on your Facebook page, write on your own website. If you want to be published, send it to the newspaper as a letter to the editor or an opinion. If you really want to become a reporter, and go and talk to them and says, I feel I can do this. How can I start? Can I start part-time? So the point is, journalists, don't let anything stop them. I cannot accept defeat when I'm out trying to get an interview or trying to get information. I keep at it, and the more doors close, the more I'm pushing. It's like, I will not stop until I find out. So the same for you. If you really want to be a journalist, even an international journalist, you can do it. Go on a vacation, come back and write about it. That's how I started.
That's so wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joyce. I feel inspired.
Great.
And I might have to consider making a career transition after that speech. but
I think you'd be a good journalist. I really do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for some of your time. I am afraid I think we're going to be just about out of the time, just because I know, Joyce, you've got a lot going on, obviously, with so many titles and things. But thank you for giving your time, some of your time today, and providing information about your career.
Natalia, please.
Oh, yes.
And Ali, I will send you my email. Natalie can send you my email where we can talk afterwards as well. And we will invite you to some of our programs. Okay. So no problem. We can continue our conversation afterwards.
Yes. Like I said, I thank you for that. I will make sure, if anyone would like to be in contact with Joyce, feel free to reach out to me or at the IRC, and I will make sure to get her information to you. Because she is obviously just a wealth of knowledge.
And who knows where all of these contexts may lead? Ali might lead to a great story. You never know.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'd like to close today by putting in a plug for some of our upcoming programs at the IRC. In particular, next Tuesday, we're offering a program, a lecture program on Africa, the road to and through democracy. So we have a wonderful speaker scheduled, and I hope you'll all be able to join us. We have a number of other really exciting stuff coming up this month. We have a busy schedule, so check out our website at irckc.org for more programs like this one and like the one next week. And of course, check out the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, where Joyce is leading a wonderful team to do wonderful work there. So anyways, you'll be able to find this conversation on YouTube and Facebook after today. So if you'd like to, feel free to send it to a friend or check it out once again and listen to what Joyce had to say one more time. But thank you so much for being here. The website links are in the chat box, and I'll let you all go for a wonderful afternoon this Friday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. It was really wonderful. I enjoyed it so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.